There have been accusations of the use of live ammunition by both sides in the conflict. Protesters are well armed, but it's unclear just where they've sourced their firearms from. They were also using grenades, fireworks and Molotov cocktails against law enforcers. Others threw rocks, wielded baseball bats and metal rods. Attempts were also made to ram trucks through police cordons. Let's now get some analysis from Sergej Trifkovic, Foreign Affairs Editor for the Chronicles magazine. Mr. Trifkovic, of course we understand that the EU is talking about imposing sanctions on the authorities to those who's responsible for violence in Ukraine. But can we expect them to be fair? Can we expect them to single out who's behind those protests, who's behind that violence there?
Well, absolutely not, because we have witnessed brazen hypocrisy from the European Union ever since the beginning of this crisis. And let us just remember the list of various EU functionaries and ministers from member countries, such as Poland, Germany and Lithuania, who actually went to Ukraine in December to harangue the demonstrators in Kiev. What we are looking at objectively, since you mentioned objectivity, is that from the phase of demonstrations early on, the protests had degenerated into hooliganism in mid-December and into terrorism since January 19th. And any talk of sanctions against Yanukovych or his ministers overlooks the fact that a major responsibility for the behavior, and we can no longer use the term demonstrators, I would rather use the term rebels, because we are looking at de facto armed rebellion, lies with Ukraine's opposition politicians, and first and foremost with the neo-Nazi party Svoboda, which has been recruiting young men of a thuggish disposition in Lvov and Ivano-Frankovsk and other places, and has effectively provided logistic support for the rebels in the Maidan Square.
But of course, there's no doubt that the EU is concerned about the events that are going on in Ukraine right now, because all the violence, all the bloodshed is happening in its backyard. Of course, Europe should react somehow, don't you think?
Yes, and an even-handed reaction would have entailed not only pressure on Ukraine's authorities, but also pressure on opposition figures to call on the demonstrators to cease and desist. And that we haven't witnessed so far. Quite the contrary, I think that the pressure that Yanukovych finds himself under is due to all the concessions that he made in the last days of January, with Prime Minister Azarov's resignation, with the withdrawal of the restrictive law on public assembly, and with the offer of amnesty. Now, if you make unreciprocated gestures of conciliatory nature, unfortunately tends to be interpreted as a sign of weakness. Ukraine has crossed the threshold of toleration, and I think that for Yanukovych to continue listening to the clarion calls from the West, and he has also been called by Biden and by Kerry and asked for restraint, would be simply self-defeating, because all of these people are up to no good. They want regime change. They're interested in a geopolitical control over the key country in Central Eastern Europe that links Russia with Europe's heartland, and they will not stop, as we know from Victoria Nuland's talks with her ambassador in Kiev. They will not stop by means foul or fair until that goal is achieved. And Yanukovych should finally realize that dealing with the demonstrators and dealing with their political representatives, as witnessed last night, is simply futile. The time has come to re-establish law and order and to fully and fairly but calmly tell the West that they should start minding their own business. They have contributed to this crisis. They have aided and abetted, both propagandistically and logistically, the rebellion, which is the true stage we have, and they should now make amends for that.
Yeah, Sergej Trifkovic, Foreign Affairs Editor for the Chronicles magazine. Mr. Trifkovic, thank you very much indeed for your time and sharing your views with us.